for a way to get in. Keep a lock on television.
I read history books and history of politics and things, and I think we would have been a lot better off if there had never ever been anything but a socialist government after the war. Because you see, the situation is now, yes, we're doing this program which is comparing the 1936 Gero March, the area around the general strike in the 20s, to what the condition of the people is today. Well, to me, the only difference is what the working man has got, or the unemployed man has got now, is the welfare state. You mention unemployment and say, oh, not again. You know what I mean? But it's there. And these things, especially where I'm from, North East, it's destroying people. You know what I mean? It's destroying them physically and mentally. It's killing people. It's destroying them. And all I'm trying to say is this problem is still here. And until we get a decent socialist government, you know what I mean, we'll always be this way. It affects me personally now because my immediate family are involved in it now. My brother's going to be laid off, my young brother. And my father hasn't worked for about 5 or 6 years now because of there being a lack of ships in the river. He'll never work again. You see, there's that many young people on the dole. I mean, the young people is going to come first before, you know, a man of 50 odd years of age. You know what I mean? His work life is finished.
Who's gonna employ you at 40 and 3 when there's choice of the young'uns and soon just like me? I'll stand in queues with a hands outstretched, asking for work, but that's not what you get. So sleep, bonny lad, don't you worry for me. I'm always aside you wherever need be. I now have me money and me future to see, but we walk with summit, just you wait and see.
The welfare state was introduced by a Labour government. Now that's the only thing that separates us between poverty and the same poverty of the 20s and of the 30s. And even this present government, and her in particular, are now destroying the welfare state. They're setting about in a small way, destroying the national health, taking little bits, and little bits are coming off all the time. The same way as the river, there's 1 yard closed, then there's 2 yards closed, and shortly the whole thing will be closed.
Oh, this side of the river's dead now, partly finished. This is a good little dock several years ago, and you go from here to the market dock, what we call the pawn shop dock. Quite a number of years ago, when there was no work, the tradesmen used to pawn their gear in the pawn shops, and when there was a bit walking, they used to go and get their gear out again.
The yard was opened in 1852 and closed in 1933. 81 years of producing well over 1,000 ships, good ships, some of the best ships in the world. There's an old saying, iron ore went in at one end of the yard and iron ships came out at the other. It was a fully comprehensive yard. The orders just came in from all over the world. I mean, if you look at the lists of ships that had been built, there was, I mean, we were even supplying the American Civil War, both sides, you know? And that is a fact, it's on the shipbuilding list. And the shipbuilding securities, the companies had got together, the shipbuilders, and they bought up the different yards. And they would buy them up and close them. Well, they did that with Jarrow. Yeah. They just closed the yard. They wanted it finished. They wanted it wiped out. 3 years. 4 years before World War. You see, they couldn't see, I suppose, that far ahead. It seems ironic that that should happen.
The Palmer shipyard was closed in 1931 because the bankers wanted to get the money back that they had advanced in the war towards the shipbuilding industry. They decided that certain yards should be closed. But the one shipyard they should not have closed was this highly efficient Palmer shipyard. The result was that 80% of the people were put out of work. The whole town, in fact, depended upon this shipyard.
She's been through history, but always appeared as the foe. I saw her on a sailing ship. Its name was the bounty, and she kept it mid. She spoke the blossoms that were to bloom, and the country whistled to a tune, but the flowers were full of discontent, and the youth were rich of everything that had left.
Man, woman, child, and youth, it must be now you know the truth. She's the woman in disguise. She's the one who tells the lies.
Fight against the ugly race of the idle wealth that's lost both face.
Man and woman, child, and youth, it must be now you know the truth. She's the woman in disguise. She's the one who tells the lies.
Deceitful heart that beats so strong, and it's all the luck that punching along. I must be happy, I must be free. It's your choice, you've gotta see. The birds fly free, but in the same cage as you and me. I was born with nothing but nothing debt. I won't pay for something that I never get.
Man and woman, child, and youth, it must be now you know the truth. She's the woman in disguise. She's the one who tells the lies.
Fight against the ugly race of the idle wealth that's lost all face.
Man and woman, child, and youth, it must be now you know the truth. She's the woman in disguise. She's the one who tells the lies.
Woman in disguise. Woman in disguise. Woman in disguise. Disguise.
Man and woman, child, and youth, it must be now you know the truth. She's the woman in disguise. She's the one who tells the lies. Man and woman, child, and youth, she's the woman in disguise. Man and woman, child, and youth, she's the woman in disguise. Man and woman, child, and youth, she's the woman in disguise. Man and woman, child, and youth, she's the woman.
As the Polish workers fight to make their stand, and behind them every honest working man. In unity there's each other, and your friend becomes your brother, and in the tyrant's heart will be a lesson learned. Give them hope, give them strength, give them life. Like a candle burning in the black of night. We are with you in our hearts and in our minds. And we'll pray for our nation through its darkest times. I know that your hearts are made of a firmer kind, and a riot stick won't kill your peace of mind. You can fight with all the spirit that you possess, because your fight is a struggle that is blessed. Give them hope, give them strength,
give them life. Like a candle burning in the black of night. We are with you in our hearts and in our minds. And we'll pray for a nation through its darkest times. Give them life, like a candle burning in the black of night. We are with you in our hearts and in our minds, and we'll pray for a nation through its darkest times.
As the Polish workers fight to make their stand, and behind them every honest working man. Join hands with your brother, and then you can help each other. Watch the tyrants burn in the fires that they have built.
Give them hope, give them strength, give them life. Like a candle burning in the black of night. We are with you in our hearts and in our minds. And we'll pray for a nation through its darkest times. Give them life, like a candle burning in the black of night. We are with you in our hearts and in our minds, and we'll pray for a nation through its darkest times.
In the same way that parts of the river were closed down in the 30s by the bankers, today it seems to be government policy to take away what little work there is on the Tyne. Some men in this area haven't worked since 78, 79, and the chance of them getting another job is practically nil, unless they compromise themselves and they work for one of the new private yards.
Well, Redhead's, there's another dock. It closed down through the British shipbuilding, and it's just been taken over recently by the local lads that got a redundancy money. And it's starting up again. Whether they'll make a go of it or not, I don't know.
The main reason it closed was that British shipbuilders thought that the foreyards on the Tyne were unusable. They made them redundant and they closed them. The reason for that is very simple. British shipbuilders are shipbuilders, not ship repairers, and there's a vast difference. We are ship repairers, and this yard that we've reopened is usable in the marketplace today.
How many contracts has the company now got?
None. But fortunately, within the hour, we'll have our first contract alongside.
Shadow on the wall in the daylight. I hear them call, I've been here before. Somebody said with the ghost of my father's washed away on the riverbed. Minstrel boy, play for me, embrace me. Like the sea, I can see my friend. He's so far away, if I touch the wall, he'll go
That's the first ship. What do you think of it?
Magic.
Magic?
Great, nice.
Doesn't look too clever, like.
Oh, so fix it up.
Alfie, wanna go instead? You think this is the first of many or what?
Hope so, aye.
No question about it. We'll get loads. Plenty of work. If you look for it,
I think I'll be looking for some shortly.
well, just come here, son, put your name down.
1,000 souls all washed away.
You just started back work here, have you?
I've been back a fortnight.
Been back a fortnight? How long have you been off?
Yeah, I've been off 10 months.
On the dole?
On the dole for 10 months, yeah.
10 months on the dole. What, you started back as your same job as you?
Shipwright.
Shipwright?
Yeah.
Same crap?
Same craft, same trade as what I was before I was made reader.
Have you put money into it, have you?
I've invested money into that,
You
so
put
I'm a
money in?
shareholder, as I say.
You're a shareholder. And does everybody own equal shares, or is like somebody's got more shares than others?
Well, it was up to what lads could afford. Some could afford £1,000, some £2,000 it was up to
So,
individual.
are you all like sort of directors or what?
Well, not directors, we have 2 floor directors, lads workmen like ourselves, like, you know, if we've got any problems we go and see them, and the other directors, we are just shareholders.
Shareholders. But like, decisions and that all are made by them. There's no like group decisions.
Well, management will manage, as we've been told, and management will manage, and if we disagree with it, we have a chance to voice our opinions.
It's a workers' company. The important thing is that it is their company. It's owned by the workers themselves. The Constitution has been set up that the workers will continue 50, 100 years from now to own this company. That's the whole idea of it.
So is it a workers' cooperative?
It's not a cooperative. It started off as a cooperative when the workers themselves started thinking about their own company to start a cooperative. It's not a cooperative because financially it won't work. It's a limited company owned, the voting shares are owned by the workers, and those voting shares will be passed down through their families. It's a family company. It always has been since 1865, and it will stay that way.
What political support has the company got?
Political support, we've had it from all channels. We've tried not to be political at all. We tried the Labour Party, the SDP, and it just by accident, the Conservative Party came out with a new government, and the Minister in particular, Mr. Norman Lamont, is taking our case seriously. He likes the idea. He supported us. We've had backroom support by the young fellow Peter Groves, who ran for Conservative MP in South Shields, was unsuccessful because it's a Labour-intensified area. But he's helped us greatly, and now our backroom has been from the backbenches of Mr. Edward DeCann.
Who's opposed to the company?
We've had a lot of opposition. The unions in particular have opposed it because they're misguided. Unions should stick to being union officials. They're not marketing people who have said that if we employed 80 people, 1,200 people would be out of work further down the river, which is a little silly. My view is that I know the market. That's why I've taken this job on. They don't. They're union officials. I'm a ship repairer.
But have they not got their own men's interest in it, or these men who are about to be employed as interests?
Well, these men that we are employing are all paid up members of the union, and they will stay that way. This yard is a closed shop. Everybody is a member of the union, apart from myself. But I'll join if necessary.
There's a difference between a union member and a trade unionist. And if these men are union members, well, it may well be that being coerced into accepting conditions that wouldn't be accepted in any average ship repairing company.
So by doing what they are doing, they could be cutting the throats of the rest of the men on the river?
What in fact they are doing are accepting working conditions, terms and conditions which are far less favourable than those that prevail in the ship repairing industry at the present time.
All right, lads, can you give us an idea what you're doing here exactly?
Welders.
Welders? What, like, are you apprentices?
First year.
First year apprentices? Do you think you've got any future here? Do you think you'll finish your apprenticeship?
Yeah. Aye.
What do you think about redheads fill up the yard?
It's great.
Why do you think it's great?
Well, it's you know, working men want to keep their job so they're not striking the, you know.
At the moment, we employ 22 men outside in the yard. We, apart from the other staff, I hope in a very short period employ all the 80 shareholders. I would like very much to think we could bring it back up to round about 300 mark, which was here 5 or 6 years ago.
Well, the situation's somewhat devastating just now. We've just had an announcement less than 1 hour ago that it's the intention of British Shipbuilders to close both the Wallsend Dry Dock and the Middle Docks by October of 1984, unless, of course, they can find a buyer to take them over.
All these orders stemming from the government.
It's part of the government policy to privatise, to phase out ship repairing in any event. But what they don't realise is the social consequences of the 1,300 employees who were involved in these particular yards.
They haven't got their interests at heart because they don't understand. They tend to sit around committees thinking about things that they don't understand. And that is the problem with the unions in this country all over today.
I'm sure that everybody here has an impression that it's a workers' cooperative. Or that's what you thought, like I was saying early on. You know, Triumph Motorcycles, when the workers went in, took over the factory to keep producing Triumph motorcycles. That was right. They were a workers' cooperative. From the management down to the shop floor, they were all the same. Everybody had put in the company and everybody got out the company. And that's what they're trying to pass redheads off. And redheads is not that at all. Well, I'm under the impression it's not. I think it's really, really suspect what's going on. I think it's really, I think that this is the whole idea, to privatise this, and I think it's just part of a great plot to destroy the trade unions on this river.
I think ship repairing-wise, there's a great future. We have the skills, we have the men. Because of the way nationalisation has gone with British shipbuilders and the closed facilities, ship repairing has been lost to this. One client of ours who used to come here regularly now takes 30% of his work to the continent. The personal touch is being lost to the potential client for ship repairing. What we're trying to do is bring it back. And my whole philosophy on this is to bring business back to the River Tyne.
Bearing in mind that in October of '82, we'd done a contraction on these yards and we reduced the workforce by 1,100 men, leaving approximately 1,250. It looks now that in view of the government's intention, which is followed through by British shipbuilders, to eliminate the balance of that workforce that was agreed in October '82. And we're talking about 1,250 jobs.
Out tonight, John, out tonight. Out in the streets, I'm watching your windows looking for a way to get in. Keep a lock on the television, you won't be doing much viewing. Trying your doors, sliding down drain pipes, I come creeping in the night. Some people say it's not a living, but even burglars gotta eat. I'm waiting till the lights out, I'm watching you. I'll come creeping in the night. I believe in class distinction, cause I only rob the rich. I don't come from Sherwood Forest, it all goes in my pockets. When policemen come a-chasing, looking for someone to nick, they don't have a chance to catch me, cause I'm up to all their tricks. I'll come creeping in the night. Is the lights out? I'll be in.
the Nazis were now coming into power and war was threatening. And that meant that there was rearmament was beginning. And it was rearmament alone that saved Jarrow from further unemployment, as it did many other places.
Well, it was what bread and butter years ago, but no, it's a dying trade now.
But is there anything that might save it?
Well, if there was a war starting tomorrow, it would be, they would save it. You wouldn't recognise this place if it was happening, such as the Falklands happened 7 months ago. If there's another war starting, all these places would pick up. Well, that's what makes you think. Where they get the money from for wars? That's what makes everybody think.
The jaw of your brow, it's full of cold sweat. And I see by your face that it's causing distress. But you may as well sleep, 'cause alas it is true. They're closing your yard, and there's naught you can do. So sleep, bonny lad, needn't you worry for me. I'm always aside you, wherever need be. And now we've nee money, and nee future to see. But we'll walk good summit, just you wait and see. I've looked in the river, and it's empty, not dry. The tide it is turning, and there's near rescue nigh. The ships are still sailing, but they drift on doon by. And may hands stand idle, didn't you think it's a crime?
It was a meeting held in the town hall with many of the townspeople as they could get in the town hall, and a voice from the public gallery shouted, "Let's have a march." And it probably sparked off like that.
What do you think the people of Jarrow think about the march now?
I've tried to answer, well, I've asked a lot of people about that, and I've heard a lot of comments about it. I think sometimes embarrassment, sometimes pride. It's what we're most famous for now.
Why should they be embarrassed?
Well, let's look back into history. Let's think about what Jarrow's famous for. Firstly, Bede, the Venerable Bede, a scholar, a worldwide known scholar. He wrote books, he brought the ecclesiastical teachings, he wrote the history of the English church, and people, he translated the Bible into English. Then you probably have a long period of not much happening after that, but it was always known as a sacred ground for Bede. Then you have Jobling, the last man to be publicly gibbeted in this way in Britain.
Whose
in an
crime
iron
was?
cage. Well, he was hanged, gibbeted for murder, a murder which he didn't actually commit, but it was during the strike of 1832.
That was the Miners' strike.
The Miners' strike, and it was the formation of the Miners' Union by Tommy Hepburn, a local miner. It was a famous case, it became national. Then you have the shipyard, which was a very great thing to be well known for. The greatest ships in the world were built here. But we're known more for the march than we are for the ships, than we are for William Jobling, the last public gibbeting, than we are for Bede, the Venerable Bede, the Jarrow March.
I mean, it was quite impressive because they had a bloke with a mouth organ at the front. You could hardly hear the mouth organ because they were singing, and certainly at the periods we went following the march and got in front of it occasionally, and then stood again to see it come in until it got into Barnsley. And where there were people congregated to watch them, they were singing and they were cheered by people. It was an area which Barnsley itself, around that area, was, you know, fairly. There was very little hostility there to the march.
And when the march was decided upon, it was an all-party march. In no sense of the word was it either Labour or Conservative.
And, you know, this area in particular, there's a whole history. There was a women's march from here. There was a terrific event that people don't mention much about. And Jarrow March at that time was seen as one of that kind of event. It wasn't seen in its isolation as it tends to get seen now. I think the reason why the Jarrow Marches, if you like, become part of history was that it was official. The council backed it. The Labour Party were involved in it, apart from some elements. And it had a sort of, it's the wrong word because it tends to denigrate it a bit. It had a sort of credibility that other unemployed marches weren't getting. They were the communists, they were the rabble, they were the work shies.
There was Tories, there was Liberals, there was Socialists. In fact, the Labour Party disowned it at the beginning. And it gathered momentum as it went along. There was, I mean, you have to remember at that time, there was marches from small towns from all over the country. But Jarrow was the best organised, the best disciplined. And there was a real, it wasn't party political, and there was a real gut feeling. If you can think of 200 men, working men with caps and their ground sheet over their chest like a bandolier, carrying 3 banners silently, well disciplined, and that visual appearance of seeing that pass, it can frighten you to think that that's happened. I mean, these people were the salt of the earth.
When we arrived at London, the last stages was Hendon. And we set out from Hendon on that Saturday morning in pouring rain. And the whole way, right down the Edgware Road, down to Marble Arch, and ultimately to Leicester Square, where we all gathered for a meal in Peter's kitchens. We were soaked to the skin, but I've never seen any men behave with such courage and such discipline.
The ironic thing about it was that after marching 300 miles and arriving back in Jarrow, they got back to be told that their dole had been stopped because they weren't available for work.
They set a model for all forms of protest against economic distress or unemployment or anything you like.
It was a natural response to a situation. That's why it was a success. It was a success as a non-violent protest march. That's why even today you cannot recapture that, because the people who try to create the Jarrow March they're doing it for political reasons. Yeah. There's an ulterior motive behind it, but there wasn't then.
I think the real achievement of the Jarrow March was that it showed that if you could sink all your party differences, if you could concentrate upon the real history of the interests of the town, you could add a page to history that could never be removed.
How do you think the recent People's March for a Job compared to the original Jarrow March?
Well, I think it's difficult to make comparisons. You see, at the time the Jarrow March was on, now everybody thinks about the Jarrow March and sees that as a one-off thing in those days. But at the actual time the Jarrow March was on, in that period, there were a number of unemployed marches.
I don't think the People's March achieved what the Jarrow March did because there wasn't enough behind it, there wasn't enough power behind it. I think it was powerful in different respects to what the Jarrow March was. Because the Jarrow March was people from all walks of life. It was Labour, Liberal, Socialists, Conservatives, a couple of Communists. It was like the whole community was on the march. The whole town had turned against the government and what they were doing to them. I'm not putting the People's March for Jobs down. I think it was quite right what they've done. It just didn't come across like the Jarrow March did, because people have changed, people's attitudes have changed, and sort of the media coverage put it across as like a left-wing, communist, infiltrated agitators, students and things, and it didn't have the same impact as what the Jarrow March did. It didn't carry it off.
It's sadism, a government policy of sadism. They love to see other people suffer.
just have to show them how determined we are. It makes me sick.
It's got to be up to us to fight back, isn't it? Everybody together.
Well, it looks that way because if a politician, so-called politician, has got no alternatives, then he shouldn't be in bloody politics.
I've fed up with the words of sympathy and rhetoric and things. We want action now. We have to get really together.
Here they come, the marchers come now, and I'm sure we'll watch it. Once again, 3 cheers for the marchers. Hip hip! Hip hip! Hip hip! All right! 3 cheers for the destruction of Maggie's government. Hip hip! Hip hip! All right! This march is one of the great marches in British history. They've had comparisons with Jarrow, and that's perfectly right. They've had comparisons with some of the other great occasions when the British people have risen in protest against mass injustice, whether it's Peterloo or Tolpuddle and the rest. Well, the People's March for Jobs of 1981 is telling the people of this country, telling the government of this country that we truly regard mass unemployment as intolerable, and we propose to shake it off our backs and to shake this government off our backs in the process.
One thing has gone through my mind as we've marched along and received such a wonderful welcome from all those who stood on the pavements as we've marched by. It is a simple message. They can't ignore us now.
Really, Jarrow failed. You know, as somebody once said, sometimes it's better to be the vanquished than the victor. Well, it's a bit of a situation kind of like that, you know. The town didn't get much, but it didn't get the old shipyard back. It didn't get the good old days back, you know, when they were making money and it was booming. That was gone forever. But what it did, in its decline, it brought that attention to the nation, and it perpetuated after the war. It pushed forward the welfare state and the health service that we have today. I mean, I think that was a fundamental step forward for this nation and for the world even, if you think of it. Now, that's what the Jarrow March was instrumental. It made people think about that.
The loneliness is a feeling inside. This is the start, that was the end. Say goodbye to our friends,
I think we've said something, you know. I think we've been successful in my eyes because me personally, I've had a chance to say something. I've put things on vinyl, and people have listened to us, and I feel I have done something in life. So I think it was all worthwhile.
She gave them a smile as she wished them all well, as she waved them up on their way. Yes, those men knew, yes, they were quite sure that their women were the bravest of brave. And on her lips there was victory, and in her heart there was pride. 'Cause mister, you know, she just doesn't cry anymore. Mister, she don't beg anymore. Mister, she don't cry anymore. It was only the women who would carry it through if there was to be victory. Crusaders were made and the women were born, created in the same mold. And on her lips there was victory, and in her heart there was pride. 'Cause mister, you know, she just doesn't cry anymore. Mister, she don't beg anymore. Mister, she don't cry anymore. Cast in a bond that was stronger than steel, the destiny of two was now fused. I'll tell you no stories, I'll tell you no fiction, just a heritage that became mine. And on her lips there was victory, and in her heart there was pride. 'Cause mister, you know, she just doesn't cry anymore. Mister, she don't beg anymore. Mister, she don't cry anymore. Sleep, bonny lad, don't you worry for me. I'm always beside you whenever need be. I know I've need money and need future to see, but we walk out summit, just you wait and see. Just you wait and see.